pretty exciting. And as I recall, the mother company was called the Ultimate Business Network. And there was several corporations that were kind of networking together. New Source was kind of like the main marketing arm. And David was kind enough to let me work for him as a trainee assistant news stockbroker. At the time, I was a painting contractor, and David gave me a hand up, enabled me to learn the business world of trading stocks and all the fun things that go along with it. And of course, I met the love of my life, who I ended up getting married to, and lived with for 25 years until she passed away. So for me, probably one of the most significant years of my life, turning point. And all in all, I'd say I had the time of my life. I loved it.
What do you recall about what the stocks did before the New Source frenzy situation took place? So meaning when the situation in the markets were more normalized before all the frenzies and the craziness and all that kind of stuff. So what do you recall what the stock investments did?
I remember it was about almost a year before I had began working there with David, that there was a stock called Gentry, and that stock had, David had gotten involved with that, and that stock had opened up at 12.5 cents a share, and I believe that it had peaked at over $2.50 a share. And another stock owned by the same business network was offered. Second stock was called Omni-Source at 12.5 cents a share. There was a good chance that was going to go up as well. So I went ahead and bought $5,000 worth, 40,000 shares at 12.5 cents a share. And that was in, I believe it was the end of March 1987 when I bought the stocks. Unfortunately, I needed the money, and I couldn't wait for it to open for public trading, so I sold my stock and got my money back, $5,000 worth. But that stock, if I had held on to it a little longer, it actually went all the way up to $1.50 on the ask. So that same stock that I had bought for 12.5 cents had gone up 10 times, over 10 times in value. But it's okay.
So how much would you have made had you held on to it longer?
Well, if I had sold it at the peak, I would have made 10 times on my money. So that $5,000, if I had sold it at the exact right time, of course, that $5,000 that I spent would have been worth $50,000.
Very good, very impressive. Now, do you recall, and again this was a long time ago, so it's probably very hard to recall a lot of facts and details, but do you recall before you or David got involved in these stocks or even heard about them, how many market makers there were in those companies, or whether there were many market makers that you even recall at all? What do you remember about that?
Well, there was a lot that I was I was a trainee at the time, so there was a lot of things that I didn't know. I did hear the number 27 market makers, as I recall. That number, I can't say that's exact, but that's what I believe was the number, 27 market makers. And it was a penny stock, of course, it wasn't traded on NASDAQ, but there were individual market makers, and I believe it was 27. People made a whole lot of money, and people that bought early and sold it definitely made some money on it. So
excellent. And all of those price increases and rises, do you recall those all took place well before New Source ever started, or any of the New Source craze or frenzy took place?
As I recall, yes. I believe New Source was at the beginning stages right before I went to work there, and so I believe it was around February, March of '88 when New Source began taking hold, and the stocks had already gone up way before then. I believe it was about 6 months before they had already been going up.
Excellent. So those price increases that went up 10 or 15 times, that all took place well before the news source. That was all like within normal, orderly markets and had nothing to do with any multi-level news source distribution.
That's my understanding.
Excellent, excellent. What was the scene like? What was the energy like? What was going on in the office? What was going on around the country? And apparently you had a little bit of a extra window into that area because Debbie was involved in the news source multi-level marketing division and so forth. So you were able to see various sides and various aspects from different angles. So what was the energy like in the early positive days?
It was incredible. I remember the news source had began having these seminars, and there would be hundreds of people that would go to the meetings. They would introduce the products. Speakers would come on. They would talk about the company and the products and the future of the company. And I remember at one of the meetings where I met Debbie, I believe there was about probably 300 or 400 people there. And I went there, I passed out my business card and mingled with people, made contacts. But it was the frenzy was really building up. People were getting excited. So I guess I could just say highly motivated people and a lot of excitement going on.
Excellent, excellent. So at that point, also in the early days, do you recall that there were several positive articles from various newspapers about the whole Ultimate Business Network? Pretty much all of the articles at that stage, up to a certain point, were mostly all positive.
Absolutely. I remember there were several celebrities that were involved. Mark Spitz was one of them. Several celebrities, lots of big investors, heavy hitters, big players, marketing people were very excited, very positive about the products. The Protectant, which was an antiviral soap that helped prevent the spread of AIDS, and lots of other good things that were coming in. It got lots of excitement going, lots of positive articles, positive press. I remember one time several news channels came into the big corporate office and they did some interviews, and lots and lots of good things seemed to be going on with the company. Very high energy at that time.
Very good, very good. So, so basically you have a situation where, from what you're saying, everything was positive, things were moving forward, people were making money, people were happy, positive press articles, the news source company was growing and growing, thousands of distributors were joining up, orders were coming in for the products. So what would you say, in your estimation and opinion, what was the dividing point to where it divided the good from the bad, to where everything went from positive to all of a sudden negative, and what was the one point that pretty much killed the company and turned everything negative? What was that one event that took place?
Well, let me go ahead and do just a little background real quickly on the two main companies before I began participating as a stockbroker were Gentry and Omni-Source. The third company was ATS, which was Applied Transdermal Systems, and that basically focused around a patch. It was a transdermal patch. There was a diet patch, all kinds of a heart patch, nitroglycerin. Basically, you could put various ingredients in, put a patch on, or it would penetrate the skin, which means you would bypass the liver, and a lot of advantages. There was a lot of hype, a lot of frenzy, a lot of excitement around this patch, And that caused, I know there was well over 20,000 distributors that jumped in on the company, and that was growing. They were just beginning. These were people, primarily multi-level marketing people, but they jumped in on the company in order to distribute the patch. And many of them bought the stock. They were very excited because of this new patch was coming out. And basically, what really pulled the rug out from under us was the FDA ruling. With all the excitement going on, all the hype, and people were buying stock like crazy, what happened was there was a ruling that came in from the FDA saying that they would not approve it. And I guess apparently they made it illegal. So that put the CEO of the mother company in a bind, because he had all of these orders. The patch was made, ready to go, all the distributors ready to buy it, the stocks were already sold, and they were about ready to open for public trading. Everything was great, and then the FDA said, nope, illegal, you cannot sell it. I mean, I'm not sure if the term would be illegal, but it was not FDA approved, and therefore you could not sell it legally. So what that did, that pretty much killed the deal, because he couldn't ship the patch, which meant the distributors who bought them, they couldn't get their product, and that pretty much put everything in a downhill momentum.
So would you say that that new rule that the FDA came out with that made the patch illegal, in one day turned the momentum from totally positive to totally negative, and that was pretty much the nail in the coffin that turned everything negative?
Absolutely. Now, what as I recall, what had happened was there was several weeks of a time frame where we weren't sure, because people were talking to the FDA. Out of 20,000 distributors, many people were doing their own investigation, calling the FBI on their own. People were getting all kinds of information coming in, and there were rumors that the FDA wasn't going to approve it before the official ruling came down. And there were also people saying, no, they will approve it. So for about a 3-week period, we were kind of in an unknown phase where we didn't know for sure, but we had suspected that it might not get approved. So for about 3 weeks, I would say there was a real shaky period where it wasn't officially pulled, but it could be pulled. And that began a panic. Once it became official that it was not going to be approved, that's when everything just started crashing.
Right. So obviously this was a long time ago, and it's hard to remember all of the details, but just to be totally accurate here, what I recall, it wasn't a question that they didn't approve anything, but it was more of what happened was the FDA suddenly, overnight, with no notice, they actually came out with their own rule that they just said any patch, period, is illegal. And any patch that covers the skin, unless it's a Band-Aid covering an open wound, they just said that all patches of that type are illegal. So it wasn't that they didn't approve it, they proactively said that all patches are illegal. So it created a situation whereby one day it was a legal patch, and then the next day, by virtue of a new law that was solely created by the FDA, never voted on by Congress, never going through any legislature, just strictly by the FDA, they created a brand new law out of thin air that said it was illegal. So basically, that's what turned, what you're saying is that's what turned the whole momentum negative, and that killed the deal. And that pretty much dragged, would you say that was so heavy because there was so much interest around the country that pretty much dragged the whole conglomerate of companies down?
Absolutely, because keep in mind there was over 20,000 distributors who had joined, who had bought product, who had signed up to distribute the product and recruit other distributors. And to my understanding, based on the people that I knew, that number could have easily gone 5 times, 10 times, very quickly had the patch been released. But um, because it was stamped illegal, well, the news spread, and that killed the momentum. Um, for one thing, no new distributors would join, and all of the current distributors of the 20,000 that had joined, well, they knew that they were not going to be able to sell it, make money on it, so that that killed the deal.
Right, right. Now, before the FDA came up with their new rule, okay, you were around there quite a bit. You saw a lot of the corporate heads. You saw a lot of people that were involved in the various subsidiaries. You met with a lot of the investors, a lot of the distributors. Did you ever notice any ill intent or bad intent from any of the company officials, or just the many employees that were around working, or was their goal to try to put out good products that were going to help people, or what would you say their whole intention was?
Well, I had worked in the corporate offices for several months, and I really liked the people there. I liked all of them. The Stearns, David, Jonathan, Mark, Deborah, Susie Stearns. I really liked them. They all seemed to be good people. The president, even Bob Singerman, and the people. They all seemed to be nice, caring people. The products, they seemed to be cutting edge, life-saving products. The protectant actually cleared up a lot of viruses, a lot of skin problems and rashes, and all kinds of problems. And the patch was going to do good things. So I think that all the people that I met and worked with in the corporate offices, they all seem to be good, caring people, wanting to help bring cutting-edge, medically healthy products to the planet and help people make money in the process. So I felt myself, everybody that I worked with seemed to be really nice, good people, just trying to make this company work. And unfortunately, when that ruling came out, it just put everything in a downhill momentum.
Right, right. So did you ever get the feeling or see any people that were there before the ruling came out that were evil people that had ill intent, that were trying to scam people or rip people off? Did you ever see any of that stuff going on?
No, I didn't see any of that, not at the corporate level. I mean, keep in mind, there was about 20,000 distributors that had joined the company, and many other support services and other businesses involved. And, I can't say I knew every single person, but in the main corporate headquarters where I was working at, they all seemed to be really nice people.
Right, right. So you talked about the corporate people. Do you recall the number 2 person in the company, Verl Stearns, and what was his relationship to your Aunt Edith?
I believe that he...
Who was Verl Stearns, and what do you know about him?
Yeah, I believe that he was a pastor at, I forget which church, but that he was involved with the Aunt Edith's church, my Aunt Edith. And I'm not sure how much his involvement was, but she had said that he had spoke there, was introduced by her pastor and as a guest speaker, and I believe he was a missionary, something, just a nice guy.
So he's not the type of guy that you think that was secretly trying to a pastor by day and a scam artist at night?
No, I thought he was a nice guy. I think people were just trying to help people, bring some good life-saving products to the world. That's my view.
Right.
I wouldn't have joined or got involved if I thought there was some bad intent. I really thought this was a great thing, and I think it was for the most part.
Now, you talked about the Omni-Source distributors, and I think you said it got to be about 22,000 people, distributors. Did you ever see or hear of the distributors possibly being a little loose with the facts and maybe saying things that weren't accurate, maybe trying to hype other people, possibly well-intentioned, maybe to try to get other distributors? But what would you say about the accuracy of a lot of the distributors and a lot of the wild claims that were being spread at that time?
Well, I've owned a couple of multi-level marketing companies myself, and I understand the nature of the game, and I know it's very difficult, even Herbalife and Amway and some of the big companies. You can't control distributors no matter what you do. And that's why you have to, in your literature, you try to stress you must stick to these guidelines about medical claims and things. But as hard as they try, you can't control people. You can't control people that are free, independent distributors. So it's very common, very easy for a lot of the hype and a lot of the facts to get a little bit exaggerated, blown out of proportion. You know, you do the best you can to try to keep some tight reins on it, but you just can't do it. So you get a lot of stories, a lot of misleading facts, and over-exaggeration. It always happens in a multi-level.
So who was First Venture? Did you work for them, and what did they do? And did First Venture ever mislead anybody or spread inaccurate information?
No, I'm pretty biased myself, of course. My brother David is, I love and respect. One of the most highly moral people I know, and very, very honest and fair. And he had a Series 7, Series 63, and a Series 24 license, and he was very protective of that. And wanted to be very strict on the guidelines. When you're handling people's money, you got to be very careful what you say. You got to be accurate and make sure they know this is a risk. This is what you're getting. So as I recall, David was very strict on what you can say and what you cannot say. As far as following the rules, when I went to broker's school, they were pretty explicit on what was legal, what was illegal, and I thought David was very, very strict on his policies as far as what could be said and what could not be said.
So did his company ever cold call random investors out of phone books or anything like that to solicit stocks to random people, or were they mainly taking orders from people who were calling in on an unsolicited basis, requiring them to sign non-solicited statements?
Yeah, not that I know. I mean, I don't know. I obviously, to my understanding, when I was there, what had happened was this. The multi-level people, primarily from my position, all of these multi-level people that had joined the company, about 20,000 of them, I would say probably 99.9% of all the customers that I dealt with had called in because they were referred by one of the distributors. They had called in and said, I want to buy some stock, ask some questions, and that was pretty much what I did as the company. I answered the questions and took their orders, but they were already excited about it. They had heard about the past two companies that had gone up 10 times in value, one of them 20 times in value, Gentry, Omni-Source 10 times in value. And then we got this new company, ATS, and naturally they wanted to get involved with that. So I took their orders and bought their stock.
So, very good. So would you say that the vast majority of the people that called and bought stock, that pretty much most all of that all took place before the FDA changed the rules of the game? And that once they changed the rules of the game, that pretty much shut the door, and it was a dead deal at that stage, and nobody could get out.
Absolutely. As I recall, the ATS, the stock that handled the patch, I believe that was sold out, and I believe it was the first or second week in June, and the FDA ruling didn't come out, or at least I wasn't aware of that, until early July. So the stock had already been sold long before the FDA ruling came out. It was already a done deal.
Right, right. So, would you say that, for the most part, any growth stock, penny stock, is always going to be a high-risk venture, just because small companies can have finance problems and so forth, and they can go out of business for a number of reasons. But as far as a risk, before the FDA changed the rules and not knowing that the FDA was going to come up with a brand new rule to make their main product illegal, that on the surface of it, it certainly was a risk, a big risk, but compared to other penny stock companies or growth companies, it probably was a good risk in a vacuum, not knowing that the FDA was going to change the rules.
Well, if you if you have a network of companies, the first two had gone up 10 times, over 10 times in value for one of them, 10 times in value for the other, and then a third company comes out, and that company even has more potential because you got 20,000 distributors that are on board. Well, it's natural to think that company's got a good chance of going up also. And that's exactly what it appeared to be. So there's still a risk. There's no guarantee with anything. But that appeared to be something that it was a very worthwhile risk. And I still would say it was a very good risk at that time.
At that time, in terms of a penny stock gamble, that was a good risk.
Absolutely.
At that point, without knowing that the rules were going to change.
Of
Now, nobody knows for sure, nobody has a crystal ball, but hypothetically, if you were to make a guess, had the FDA not changed the rules of the game, not suddenly create a brand new law out of thin air to make the patch illegal, which effectively put the company out of business, what do you think may have possibly happened to the company and to the stock had the FDA not come up with that new rule? What is the possibility that could have taken place?
Well, since I ended up marrying one of the top multi-level leaders in Omni-Source, who had over 20,000 distributors on her own group, and was friends with some of the other leaders who had, one of them had 100,000 distributors in her group, and talking with them, they and so many of their people, they were so excited about what was going on. They were going to bring their people, their lower people and their downlines on board to buy products. Had the patch had it not had the problems, okay? So from my understanding, it was about ready to explode with sales and people, and for my belief is that I think the stock could have gone up maybe 10, 20, 30, 40 times, considering what the other two stocks had done. I mean, it looked very, very promising, but once again, when the FDA pulled the rug out from under them, everything came to a stop.
So would you say that essentially was the nail in the coffin, that once the FDA pulled the rug out from under them, that basically killed the company, although they would struggle on for several months to try their best, it was pretty much a hopeless case. That it was pretty much, it was the shot in the heart. That pretty much it was a dead deal at that point.
I believe it was. Well, it was, looking back, and even if I didn't know the future, which I do now, but I would say definitely, no doubt about it.
So in the early days when investors were calling First Venture and calling you, and you were talking to them, or calling David or whatever, unsolicited or whatever, did you or David or anybody have any idea or notion that some months later that the FDA was going to suddenly create a new law and make the product illegal and put the company out of business? Did you or anybody know that was going to happen?
From my perspective, I'd have to say, of course not. There was no way of knowing that, and one reason why, I understand President Reagan's son had actually been involved with a similar patch company prior to that, and there was another patch company. No problems, no FDA rulings against it, and when the Omni-Source patch, actually technically called ATS, when that came out, there was really no way of knowing or believing that was going to have any legal problems. So my answer would be, no. I mean, I can't know what was in every single person's mind, but from my perspective, I don't know anybody that even suspected that would happen at that point.
Who was Dr. Larry Ford, and what was his relationship to the patch, which was called La Patch, and New Source, and what was his credentials?
I believe he was the key designer of the patch, that particular patch, and he was a brilliant doctor, researcher, and scientist. And I believe he was the one that was able to basically design the way that the patch works. So I don't have all of the medical knowledge involved, but that's my understanding that he was a brilliant doctor.
So was Dr. Larry Ford a scam artist or a fraudster in any stretch of the word?
Not to my knowledge at all. I thought he was a very highly respected, credible doctor.
Now, about a year after the FDA came up with the new law, the company slowly went out of business. They made patches illegal. So about a year after the company was ran out of business, forced out of business for whatever reason, there came onto the market a Nicoderm patch. And would you say that that was a similar type of transdermal technology, if not the same type of technology? And how much money or how many billions of dollars has the Nicoderm patch made?
I can't say I know the exact numbers, but I do remember in the early days when our patch, the ATS patch, the New Source patch, we'll call it, was still legal and everything was fine. I remember specifically being told that we were going to have the diet patch, the not smoking patch, and a couple of other patches. So the Nicoderm patch was the exact same patch that was going to be marketed by New Source. So I can't say exactly how or why that all happened the way that it did, but I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, that's about all you can say. So why do you think some of the newspaper articles that some people claim were actually sales for some big pharma companies or whatever, that they wrote some articles stating that patches were a bogus technology and it's impossible, that there's no way that a patch could ever work, and that, that it was a scam and an illegal patch. But then a year after the company went out of business, then the Nicoderm patch was selling billions of dollars. That they never complained about the Nicoderm patch. They never said anything negative. They treated that as though it was a brilliant and legitimate technology. But when the smaller company had it, they acted like that it was a fantasy, that there's no possible way that patches could ever work. Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think any media person that ever said that the technology was a scam was a scammy media person, because it's just common sense that tells you that naturally we absorb chemicals in the skin. I mean, anything, if you put something on your skin, you're going to absorb it, good or bad. And as far as the technology to do it effectively, well, sure, it requires some technique, but it's ridiculous to say that wouldn't work. Of course, there's definitely ways of making it work. It just so happens that Larry Ford and a few others were able to figure out how to make it work a little bit more exact, to use the right type of chemicals and ingredients. But of course, when your skin has pores in it, and your pores are going to absorb various items. If you put the wrong kind of lead paint on your skin, it's bad for you. You can get all kinds of bad things, poison, and if you put the right kinds of good nutrients and ingredients in your skin, well, just figure that out.
Precisely. So then, would you say then that the company actually had good, honest, legitimate, well-meaning products, and that they had some good, honest, smart, well-meaning officers and employees working for the company? So would you say they had good people working for the company and good products?
I believe they were, great people, great products, and a great company. And not only did I believe that, but well over 20,000 people believed that. including celebrities and big investors and people all over the country also believe that. And I have no reason to disbelieve that, even at this time. I think that events happened later on, primarily the FDA ruling that obviously put everything in a tizzy, but what are you going to do?
What do you remember about the Protectin product, and what did you think about that, and was that a good, legitimate product?
Yeah, I've heard many reports out in the field that people with various jungle rot and skin fevers and rashes had used that and it cleared up. They call it an antiviral soap. I remember my buddy Cy had a friend who was in the jungle. He was in the, I guess he was in the Marines, and he had a terrible case of some jungle rashes, and he had used the Protectin and it cleared him up, and he just loved it and swore by it. Many people, different stories, had used the Protectin, loved the Protectin. I used it myself, and it just seemed to it seemed to have a real good effect on your skin, and plus the fact that it would protect you against viruses like AIDS. So if you washed your skin with it, it would last for a while, and if you get viruses, the wrong kinds of viruses, it's going to protect your skin against it. So lots of wonderful things about Protectin.
And do you remember that was developed by some doctors, one of them being Dr. Kamal Assam and some other high-level doctors that did double-blind research reports and so forth?
Yes.
So would you say that the Protectin product was a good product, but because of the association to the Ultimate Business Network and the whole conglomerate, that once the FDA changed the rules, the patch being their biggest product, their most public product, the weight of the patch just pulled the whole thing, and the Protectin and all of the other good products all got pulled down the tubes with it at the same time?
Yes. Yes. Because the other products, there were several other products, but the patch was the one that really brought in the 20,000 multi-level distributors, which, by the way, could have easily gone to 100,000 distributors or more very quickly. So that had drawn in the momentum, the money, the people. Now, they'd already had money and people going on, but that just multiplied it enormously. And people were counting on that patch because it's a diet patch, it's a hot seller. When that went, the momentum went with it.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Gentry Labs went to from 12.5 cents to $2.50 a share. And that was before New-Source, without the 22,000 growing New-Source distributors and all of that positive momentum. Do you think that the ATS stock, if they did not get hit up by the shock of the heart by the FDA with the new rule change, could that have easily become a $10 stock?
To my understanding, absolutely. Absolutely. With the amount of people involved, and keep in mind, too, a huge amount of the 20,000 distributors were beginning to buy stock in the company because they were selling it, the products, and they had believed that the stocks are going to go up. So you've got all of these new people coming in, selling the products and buying the stock. Naturally, the stock's going to go up.
Exactly. Would you say that, if you had to make a guesstimate, that the company ultimately died, that was 50% because of the FDA came out with a new rule and made their key product illegal, 90%, 95%, or 99%? How much percentage would you say that the FDA's new rule, new law, contributed to the death of the company?
Well, there's variables that I don't know about, but from my perspective, I mean, I would have to say probably 99%, because just based on what I knew, I mean, everything was right there with the new distributors coming in, money coming in, But once they had the patches manufactured, boxed up, ready to ship, in fact, I think there were some samples that were shipped. But once that ruling came out, which put a freeze on no products were able to be sold, that killed everything. So I would have to say that that law pretty much did us in. I probably have to say 99% from my perspective.
Sure, that makes sense. Would you say then that had the FDA not come up with the new law, and had the company been able to ship the products and to continue to grow the company and to bring in new distributors, that it's very likely that the company would have had an explosive growth where they would have brought in thousands, if not tens of thousands of more distributors, and the stocks would have grown to maybe easily $5, $10, possibly $20 a share. But maybe some years later, maybe the company could have died for whatever reason. But at a minimum, you would have at least seen an initial explosive growth, and it would have definitely made the stocks go higher for a while. If maybe later down the road something would happen, but you would have definitely seen a pretty good spurt of growth had that new law not been changed. Is that what you're saying?
I believe so. I believe that it's very reasonable you could have done 10 times what Gentry did. Gentry went up to $2.50 a share with really hardly any marketing, a little bit, but nothing compared to what Omni-Source had. So when you consider the amount of people that were getting involved with the marketing, I would say that it could definitely have gone way beyond what Gentry did. And Gentry went up 20 times in value before it went down.
Right, that makes perfect sense. So what you're telling me then is that you attribute the company's ultimate death to 99% to the new rule that the FDA came out with suddenly, without notice, and without anybody voting on it, that was 99% of the cause. That means that only 1% would be attributed to possibly lack of talent of the company officers and employees. So that's huge, what you're saying.
Based on my perspective, on all of the distributors that I had spoken to, which were among the very top leaders of the company, and some of the top investors in the company, they had all said the same thing. And that was, when that ruling came down, that was it. They could no longer go forward.
So just to be clear, the company did not go out of business because of incompetency of the corporate officers or dishonesty of the corporate officers. It was not, you're saying it was 99% because of the FDA's new rules, not because of mishandling by company officials.
That's what I believe. Because everything seemed to be doing fine. I mean, they had their obstacles, their struggles, but they had held it together. Money was coming in, distributors were coming in, products were being sold. But once that law happened, that pretty much wiped everything out.
Is it possible that other pharmaceutical companies, and again this is just a guess because obviously you wouldn't know, but possibly other pharmaceutical companies may have been jealous, may have been worried, and possibly could have had a hand in doing things to help nudge the FDA to come up with this new law to maybe push some smaller companies out of business? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It wouldn't surprise me. Businesses have done that before, many, many times in the past, and it's an old trick. I think Rockefeller did similar techniques, and very, very likely.
Have you heard of any situations whereby the heads of the FDA are friends and kind of tied into heads of certain big pharmaceutical companies? Have you heard of any of those situations going on?
Yes. I believe many of the top FDA officials had later gone to work for the pharmaceutical companies directly after they left their government job. So, go figure.
but they may have a vested interest in seeing smaller companies go out of business. It could be a threat, too.
I believe so. It's happened before, and I believe it definitely.
Have you ever heard of any situations where certain newspaper writers act as shills for big companies and will print certain things that are favorable to the big companies in order to hurt the credibility of smaller companies? Does that ever happen?
Well, I wouldn't believe everything that you read in the newspaper or see on television. Absolutely.
Okay, that's a good, fair assessment. At that time, did you ever see any unfair or inaccurate newspaper stories coming out about the company, or anything that was slanted in a way that could hurt them or damage their credibility that would ultimately sabotage them?
Yes, there was a few articles that had come out. One of them was, there was a reporter by the name of Bob Bowder for the San Diego Tribune, and I remember he had written quite a few articles that seemed to be bashing Source, and it's kind of on a rampage. Why he did it, I can't say for absolute certainty, but I know there was a few other reporters kind of similar that were coming up with stories that were really seemed to be very prejudiced.
Right, right. And you started a couple of small companies, and you do understand how totally damaging that can be to a small company when you have unfair and negative articles come out about the company, how that can pull away distributors, pull away investments, pull away momentum. You understand how totally sabotaging and damaging that can be.
Absolutely. Even big companies can be hurt by unfavorable media.
That's absolutely true. Did you ever see anything that First Venture or David did that was dishonest in any way?
Now, from what I saw.
Are you aware that David later would have an eBay store business for 20 years, and in 20 years' time never ever received one negative review, only 100% positive reviews in 20 years of having an eBay store?
Yes, I am aware of that. I'm very proud of him.
So that really wouldn't be indicative of anybody that's doing bad business or trying to be unfair to their customers.
No.
During that time, did anybody unfairly try to blame David for anything?
Yes, there was a lot of finger pointing. Not a whole lot, but there was a lot of finger pointing. Many people that invested money, they bought product, they bought stock, and when things went sour, they lost their money, then they blamed a lot of people, and David was one of them. So yeah, there was definitely a lot of finger pointing when things turned south.
Right, right. What was your most positive memory from that period?
That were extremely excited and hyped up, and the parties that were going on in the corporate headquarters, mass volumes of people flooding into the corporate headquarters. Hundreds of people were coming in there to visit the head man, David Stearns, and some of the other support services were roaming around in the corporate headquarters, and many of them were coming into our office, and it was just an extremely cheerful, happy time in those times, and that's of course when I ended up falling in love with my soon-to-be wife, Debbie.
Very good. So after the company got the rug pulled out from under them and the FDA changed the rules and made their key product illegal, and they continued to get a barrage of attacks from other government agencies and newspapers and so forth, would you say that they were fighting an uphill struggle and that the odds were way against them, but from their perspective they were trying their best to survive, even though it was like a mission impossible?
Yes, I witnessed that. It seemed that, and I understand, I've been there myself with companies that have made it and some that have failed, and I understand that feeling that when things are going down, they fought hard to survive because they did have several other products, and there were people, and the company They tried to stay in business, keep things alive and keep things going, but it was pretty hard because the very heart of their company had pretty much vanished. So I had witnessed that, a lot of people fighting hard to try to keep it alive, but unfortunately it was going down.
Right. Now, on that note, was David trying the best he could do to survive despite the attacks he was undergoing and the negative things he ran into, and the fact that the ship was kind of sinking? Was he was in an uphill? Would you say he was in an uphill struggle? And was he trying to do whatever he could do to survive, even though there were a lot of difficulties ahead?
Absolutely. It was very tough because there's always hope. There's a will, there's a way, and there still was a very slight possibility that somehow they could have survived. At the time, most all of us didn't believe that they had a prayer's chance to make it, but I know David, my brother, and several people did fight to stay alive and believe that there was a chance that they could somehow get out of that problem, and some of their other products would be able to come in and save the day. But unfortunately, that didn't happen.
So do you think it was more fair to the investors that the company try to survive, try to turn things around, or would it have been better for the investors if the company and everybody involved just threw in the towel and just went out of business on day one?
Right. Well, I mean, naturally, you want to try your best to protect the investors who already did buy stock, and you're going to do everything you can to try to save the company, keep it afloat, and then unfortunately, you have the dilemma, because then when new investors come in and they want to buy stock or get involved in the company, the new distributors as well, then you have to weigh, well, do we bring in new people and new money to try to save the company, or, I mean, these people, they need to realize, well, they're putting their money in a sinking ship. So it's a tough call to make, but you can understand it both ways. So basically, from First Venture's point of view, I understand that position is to try your best to save the company and make it possible that the stock's open for public trading, so people that did buy stock would be able to sell their stocks and get their money out. So I believe that the people that fought to keep the company alive did the best they could do for what they believed was right.
Okay, very good. Now, do you recall anything about how busy David was at that time? How many phone calls he was getting per day? Did he have a lot of extra time? And was he trying to take as many calls as possible? Or was he short on time? And what was his timing like on a daily basis?
Well, he had about as much time as somebody that was on the Titanic who was bailing out water as the sink was shipping. You've got to spend every minute of the day trying to bail water out and try to keep it afloat. So it was pretty tough. I recall hundreds of calls coming in daily. And obviously some of those were screened, but you can only handle so many calls. You just cannot handle mass volumes of phone calls coming in and everybody having every different type of question. Some questions completely unrelated to the stock. Some people calling in asking questions about one of the companies and asking about one of the products, and does the product do this? What about this? There's so many calls coming in because you got 20,000 distributors involved, and many of them are calling in to David's company, First Venture, asking totally unrelated questions, bogging up the phone lines. So it was pretty tough handling all of this, all the people.
Right. And when calls were coming in, all the, pouring in, would you say, was there anything David could even do to help by talking to the people when it was mostly the same old questions of people that wanted to chit-chat for 20, 30 minutes with hundreds of calls coming in? Would you say there really wasn't much he could do for them anyhow at that point?
No, there really wasn't much that he could do other than just try his best to keep things together. Um, that's about all he could do. It was the same question as, what's going to happen with the company? What could he say? He didn't know. All he could do was just try to keep things afloat as best he could. So.
Do you think David got screwed over or screwed up in any way from this whole mess? Or did he make out well, or did he end up broke with the whole situation?
Well, pretty much most of the people, especially the ones who bought that bought stock, that weren't able to sell it, we all lost. We lost time, we lost money. The closer you were to the corporate headquarters, the more you lost. David was pretty close, and he pretty much lost his whole business. He lost a lot of money, lost a lot of time. So he definitely lost quite a bit. But to lose is to gain, and we gained a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. So.
Going back to the early stages, backing in the beginning, without naming any names, do you recall people making money, and what sort of profits or benefits did any of the early investors end up making, and how did they do it?
Yeah, I know of one person who made at least 3 times on their money, on their investment. And I had heard stories of other people making more than 3 times return on their investment within 6 months. It's a 300% return in 6 months. And some people, I can't recall their names, but I had heard some people had actually made 10 times on their investment. Now, a person who had actually bought Gentry at 12.5 cents a share and sold it at $2.50 would have made 20 times on their money. I hadn't heard specifically the name, but I did hear that there was somebody who did, a few people who did sell it at the very bottom, and buy it at the bottom and sell it at the very peak. So yes, I had heard several stories.
So do you recall that, getting back to the product Protectin, you said that was a really good product that was helping people, clearing up skin problems and killing diseases and so forth, that it was an antibacterial and antiviral soap product developed by some leading doctors. Do you recall that before that was introduced, that there, as far as you remember, there were no antibacterial soaps on the market, and after that product was introduced, that other companies started introducing antibacterial products that maybe weren't quite as good as Protectin, but they might have been 50% because at least they had the antibacterial products, and that at least started that whole movement of getting antibacterial soaps. So possibly other companies stole the idea, they came out with it, but Protectin kind of started. Would you say that Protectin kind of started that movement, and maybe in some way Protectin may have actually helped to, save millions of lives in helping people through, promoting that kind of good products into the market? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of good that did come out of that whole experience with the company, with Omni-Source. A lot of good things happened. There were some people that lost money and lost time, but such is life. But there was many, many good, wonderful things that happened as a result of that big explosion of this company. A lot of good things. A lot of people are alive today because of Omni-Source. So I look at the positives. Many, many positive things that happened because of that. And yes, the Protectin and a couple of the other products were cutting edge technology. 1988 is what we're talking about. And soon after that, many other new products came out on the market. So I think it's very likely that that probably helped get a lot of other things going as well.
So would you say, in discussing just the product aspects, let's forget about the investment for a minute, the Protectin product, would you say that the Protectin product, as far as you saw in your understanding, was that a good or a great product?
I think it was a fabulous product, and not only me, but I had heard that Elizabeth Taylor and Eddie Albert, and there were several other celebrities that had gotten involved with that in different ways because of the protectant, because the product was very helpful at preventing the spread of AIDS. I mean, it's not going to cure AIDS if you have it, of course, but it can prevent the spread of it. And, deadly viruses like that, you want to do everything you can to help. So protectant helped. It wasn't a cure, but it helped.
So you mentioned you heard several positive reports about protectant. Did you ever hear any negative reports about protectant? Anybody dying from it? Anybody getting diseases, rashes? Any negative reports about protectant?
I did not hear one negative thing about protectant, not myself. And I mean, it was a soap, and it was a very gentle, easy soap. Great. I remember people used to say, well, you can use bleach and that'll also kill AIDS. Yeah, but if you put bleach on your skin, that could kill you too. But protectant was a way of preventing the spread of AIDS and other viruses, but it was gentle. So you could use it. It wouldn't hurt you if you used it. Other soaps and could be used, but they would hurt you and cause all kinds of problems. So protectant, fabulous.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Moving on to the next product, the LaPatch diet patch, as developed by Dr. Larry Ford. Forgetting about, for a moment, let's forget about the investments or the new rules where the FDA came out and sabotaged the company and the product. Just the product itself. From what you saw, would you say that was a good, great, excellent product, bad product? What would you say about the LaPatch skin patch product as you know it?
I mean, I'm limited on what I can say about the technology, the research, and what other doctors, biochemists, and other researchers said that it was fabulous. The technology behind it. The problem was that because of the FDA ruling, it was prevented from actually being released. So it would be difficult for me to say it was a good product when it couldn't be actually shipped and used. But as far as the actual technology of the product, yes, fabulous. And that's just not me, but many other doctors and researchers.
Right, that's a fair assessment. That's right. So because of the new new rules, FDA rules, it was never really fully able to be implemented. But from the research you saw, the people who did check into the products, all that kind of thing, did you ever hear anything negative about the LaPatch product? I mean, other than obviously the fact that it never did get released or didn't come out, but for the actual product, what it was supposed to be, the design by Dr. Larry Ford and so forth, was there anything negative about the product?
No, not at all. I mean, the thing about it is this. What we're talking about is a delivery system. We're talking about a way of getting nutrients, ingredients into your bloodstream via the pores in your skin. And obviously, it is important to monitor that. If you put bad ingredients, you don't want to put bad ingredients in your bloodstream. You put good ingredients. So people can say, well, yeah, what happens if you put bad poison into your system? Well, of course that's going to be bad. But the technology itself was fabulous because you could just put a patch on and put good nutrients into your system. Or weight loss, you could put diet patches, things to suppress. So you're bypassing your liver for one thing, and there's many advantages to bypassing your liver. So the technology is fabulous if you do it correctly, of course.
Excellent. Okay, now moving on to another product line that the company had were the isotonics sports drinks that were supposed to be real good and gentle on your system, although not quite as sexy as the LaPatch or the protectant product. Not quite as much mass appeal, but from what you know and what you saw, were those good products, and what did you know about the isotonics product line?
I have limited knowledge on isotonics, but just from the limited knowledge I obtained from the researchers, some of the doctors that were involved floating around the office, that they were very happy with it and agreed it was great products, nutritional products that would break down in the system and be absorbed into your system much better. And So I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on the isotonics itself, but I did hear very great, wonderful reviews from lots of credible people.
Okay, fair enough. But nothing, you never heard a negative review on
No.
it? Okay. Now, the company had lots of other product lines and related products and so forth, um, and other medical products through Gentry and Omni-Source and whatnot. Did you ever hear of any negative products that were bogus products or scam products that the company had?
Not that I know of.
Okay, so getting away from the bureaucratic legislation of the new rules and the investment, just talking about the products, are you telling me then that all of the products that you saw, to your knowledge, were all good products and you never saw one negative or one bogus product?
To my knowledge, and the thing about it is, there was lots of companies and things going on that, I can't say I was every place, everywhere, but from my knowledge, I didn't see any negative problems with any of the products.
So would you say that the company, for the most part, was trying to come out with and market good products that would help people in various ways and hopefully make profits for other people, but more importantly, that they were good products that were trying to, prevent, diseases or help people lose weight or help them to stop smoking or help them to have better sports products. So from what you're saying is that, and obviously you didn't see every single product, but you never saw any negative products or scam products, and from what you saw, everything was either pretty good or excellent and very good.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So would you say that that is a totally unfair, ridiculous, and misleading statement to say that the company was selling or marketing bogus products that didn't exist?
Yes, I would say that's very unfair.
Okay. What do you think are the best things to come out of it, or the best lesson that came out of that whole era and operation and so forth?
Well, I think a good thing is, if you, whatever you invest in, make sure that you can afford to lose it, because there's a risk in anything. I don't care if you're buying a government bond, everything has a risk to it. You have different degrees of risks. Penny stocks are one of the most risky investments on earth. You have options, and I think penny stocks may even be riskier than options. My broker teacher said that she said that she believed that penny stocks, the average penny stock was about 1 out of 500 really had a chance to succeed. Now maybe she was bearish on it, but the bottom line is penny stocks are very risky, very, very risky. And however, when they pay off, they can pay off very nicely. So you have to look at it as a gamble, and you don't want to put in any money into penny stocks or things of that nature unless you can lose it. And regarding joining multi-level or anything like that, just make sure that you're able to afford the loss. And that's why if you're going to buy inventory or invest your time and money in a project, don't put everything you have into it. You got to take a chance with anything you do in life. So just be prepared that not everything works out perfectly, and you'll be fine.
Very good advice. Very good advice. So as far as penny stocks in general, would you rank these investments, even at the time, as actually looking much better than your average penny stock investment at that time, before we're talking before the FDA changed the rules on everybody?
Absolutely. There's not too many stocks that you can say that had gone up over 10 times in value within a year, but these did.
Did you ever wonder why, and this question may not be relevant to you, and so you don't have to even comment on this, but did you ever wonder why, if the SEC was cracking down, let me read it up, Did you ever wonder why, if the SEC was cracking down on smaller firms associated with the Ultimate Business Network, why they never hassled the larger 27 market-making firms that were making markets in these companies years before we even heard of the company? Companies like Nash Weiss, Dillon Securities, Charles Schwab, Merrill Lynch, and many others that were making markets in these companies, that they pretty much went untouched.
Well, I couldn't really couldn't really say all the reasons why the SEC does what it does, but probably not exactly fair with the little guy.
Okay, fair enough. When you were there, did you see any? Did you? When you were there, did you ever see any fake news stories, fake rumors, or other fake things going on, either from newspapers or other news sources?
Many, many fake stories, exaggerated stories. You get the good, the bad, and the ugly with any explosions like this. And you have the competitors too. Lots of competitor companies. Even Herbalife was a competitor. Amway, they were all competitors with NewsSource because they had a similar type of multi-level marketing company. And when you have competitors everywhere from the company to the distributor, you're going to compete. And you're going to say all kinds of stories, some true, some untrue. So the answer, yes, there's all kinds of fake stories that did come out from different sources.
So would you say that some competitors were possibly trying to sabotage the company to help run them out of business?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you recall that around that time, President Ronald Reagan's son, Michael Reagan, was actually on television selling a very similar type of, and competitive type of diet patch product?
Yes, I had heard that.
After the FDA had suddenly changed the laws and made the diet patch illegal overnight, and the company was going down the tubes, although they were trying their best to hang on, is there anything that David could have done differently that would have turned everything around and made everything a success, or was he pretty much swimming upstream, and there was really not much that he could do, although he was trying? It was pretty much a dead deal. What's your thoughts on that?
I think David could have changed things about as easy as you can turn a hurricane around if it's coming in your city. There's just not much you can do.
Okay, so moving on to another subject, when things were peaking, before the FDA came up with the new rule change, and things were on the rise, do you remember what was the energy like in the office buildings of the NewsSource headquarters? Do you remember any lines in the office buildings? And have you ever seen anything like that again? What was the momentum and the energy like with everybody?
It was phenomenal. And as I said, there were hundreds of people that were coming in, sometimes daily. People from all over the country, celebrities. There was news people were coming in back when things were good. All kinds of people, investors from China. Lots of action, lots of people, lots of excitement, a lot of happiness going on during those days before the ruling came in.
Very good. Do you recall that many of the companies within the Ultimate Business Network, that they were all pretty much tied in and networked together, and so that once the FDA changed the rules on the main company, and the patch, which was their biggest product, was outlawed, that changed the momentum of everything, and that once the parent company was going down, that it pretty much dragged the whole group down, and that pretty much there was nothing that you could do to turn around any of the subsidiaries within the group, that it was all pretty much coming down together.
Absolutely, because everything was kind of centered, in a manner of speaking, around the heart of the marketing arm, which was NewsSource. So now, if they didn't go in the NewsSource direction, they could have marketed it in a number of different ways, but because they chose the New Source direction, which is like Herbalife, very similar marketing arm. Because of that, everything focused on the patch. And the protectant was fabulous, but it just shifted on this patch. And because everything was centered on the patch, 22,000 distributors and growing. And then when the patch was basically outlawed, that just completely that killed everything.
Right. Now, do you think that if people are dead set in believing lies or dead set in believing fake news, that it's possible to change their minds if they don't want to change their minds, or does that even matter?
Well, there's always a mystery to whether you can change someone's mind or whether they will allow you to change their mind. There's a mystery there. Sometimes you can affect people's thinking with what you do, and sometimes you can't. So I would say that there's a lot of people that they're dead set on believing something, and that's it. Whether it's the shape of the earth or something else. Some people are just fixed on a particular belief, and that's it. Other people are more open-minded, and they're willing to learn new things, and so it's just hard to tell what each individual person is thinking.
Right, so you're saying that people pretty much will believe, the average person will believe what they want to believe. They don't necessarily want to think things through or think things critically, and they like sometimes simple, easy narratives that are packaged up for them.
I believe that if a person really has a passion for the truth, and if they seek the truth, they'll find it, that they really do. So I think much of it depends on what a person wants. And if they, if the truth is kind of, it's kind of important, but if they have other motives, then some people don't really want to know the truth. Because sometimes the truth is ugly, and you really don't want to know it. But if you really want to know what's going on, you'll have to sometimes discover things that are unpleasant. And so that's pretty much the way I see it.
Do you think that if somebody, say, makes a risky investment that maybe they shouldn't be making, or they get over their head, and if something goes wrong with that investment, that it's easier for them to try to blame other people or point the finger at other people rather than take the responsibility and just say, hey, maybe I should have invested because it was a growth company and there are a lot of risks that a lot of people find it much easier to try to blame others rather than just admit the reality that they took some risk, and for whatever reason, whether it's the FDA's fault or Big Pharma's fault, whatever, the investment went bad, but it's much easier for them to just point the finger and blame others.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of variables in why people do the things they do and why you buy stock, and there's cases where there's swindlers, and they're going to sell people all kinds of things that aren't real, and there's legitimate risk investments that people do, so there's a real fine line. In the case of First Venture, it was pretty cut and dry. I thought definitely at First Venture, were very, very, very solid. We told the truth as to what happened, and we'd witnessed two stocks prior coming out, going up over 10 times in value. With this third company, ATS, there was actually other companies too, but what I was involved with, ATS, that was the new one on the block. And that had potential. It was a risk, but based on the performance of the last two companies, it looked like a very worthwhile risk. However, it was still a risk, and that's what we had told people. There's no guarantees, but it certainly looks promising. And based on the information that we all had, it looked like it was a very worthwhile risk, but the fact that it didn't work out was a combination of several factors that were out of our control, But to point the finger, you could blame the FDA, you could blame a pharmaceutical company. But sometimes things just happen, and you have to just say, well, I mean, sometimes it's bad weather that'll completely destroy the crops or do something else. And you have to accept that in life sometimes things happen. You can get hit by a car driving down the freeway. Things happen that are sometimes just out of our control. We have to accept it. But as far as blaming First Venture, even, I don't even think David Stearns of the Ultimate Business Network, I really think he legitimately tried everything he could, but things out of his control happened. And the FDA making that rule was the thing that happened. So sometimes in life you just have to accept things and go on and deal with it.
When the FDA changed the rules suddenly, do you remember that when the FDA changed the rules suddenly without notice, do you have any ideas on if they had any influences from other big pharma companies on why they changed the rules so quickly? Do you think it's possible that possibly they changed the rules because some other pressures from some other big pharmaceutical companies wanted them to change the rules because they didn't want other companies competing with them? Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I believe that maybe the American government, our system, maybe it is the best in the world, and it's fabulous. And I'm not going to criticize everything about us, but we do have some problems. We do have some corruption. There's corrupt people. I think a lot of people in government are wonderful, good people, and they're doing the best they can. But obviously, you're going to get corruption in all walks of life. And in our government, absolutely, there's all kinds of bribes going on, no doubt.
Are you familiar with the word corporatism? And that's basically where big business uses big government to create new rules, new laws, and manipulate situations to run the little guy out of business, so that the big corporations who are in bed with big government can enjoy more profits, make more money, and not have new competition. Are you familiar with the corporatist ideas?
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
So you believe that that happens a lot?
Oh, of course. Things are very positive and happy during those days. The distributor base was growing every day.
Okay, very good. And then do you remember this press release? And what was this about?
Okay, Gentry Labs, yes. And about the protectant, this is a fabulous product. It prevented the spreading of AIDS, and maybe on a small scale, but still, if you wash yourself with protectant, you put protectant on you, and you're clean, it prevents the AIDS virus from getting on your body.
And other viruses.
And other viruses, okay? And obviously, every little bit helps. So you don't know. I mean, it might be that little extra bit of protection that just might save your life. So this is a fabulous product. Very good and very gentle on the system. And it did all kinds of other good things, too. It cleared up rashes and skin problems. So it was fabulous, fabulous product. I believed in this wholeheartedly, and so did many other people.
And do you remember that certain products with protectant briefly sold in some drugstores, Thrifties, drugstores, and others before the whole company got taken down? Here's one of the products.
Yes. Pure confidence.
Mm-hmm. And how about this?
Yes. Virus Powerful Soap.
Mm-hmm.
Very powerful.
And do you remember this article when things were positive?
I mean, if you're going to a party and say there's 300 people that you're going to be mingling with in Hollywood or somewhere in LA. You never know. I mean, wouldn't you feel better knowing that you're protected a little bit? So if there's some viruses, not even just AIDS, but something else, and you're protected and your body's clean and you've got this extra protection on you, well, that's okay. Estrogen patches. Fabulous. Great products, great ideas. And I really believe that everything about the company had the people, it had the products, it had it, and I think it definitely could have exploded. But I also believe in God Almighty, and for whatever reason, things worked out the way that they were supposed to work out. The business side had some problems, but I ended up falling in love and getting married and having the time of my life. So I'm very, very happy about everything. And I learned so much thanks to David. It taught me the brokerage industry, taught me many, many sales techniques. So I'm absolutely grateful. And I know other people are too. There's a few people that just like to complain about everything, but there's a lot of people that were grateful and very happy about how it worked out. Sharon Armstrong, I'm not sure she's even still alive. She became a good friend of ours for years, had 100,000 distributors in her group, and she loved David. And so I thought it was a good experience, and there's always going to be good and bad. Some people moved on and benefited from it, and other people just like to complain about things. So I guess it just depends on how you look at life.
Right, very good. And also some of the other corporate officers, Fred Limberg and Leo McGowan, were they good, talented, and honest people?
Yes. Yeah, I like Fred.
Were they well-meaning?
Yeah. In fact, Debbie and I had run into them about 5 years later, working for another company, and we gave each other hugs, and they even came to a couple of our seminars that we had for our company that we formed, and we were friends, and everything was great. And I mean, time took its toll, and they were getting pretty old and everything, but they were in good spirits. They were happy. So
Lindbergh was a good, talented, honest man. Leo McGowan was a good, talented, honest man. Verl Stearns was a good, honest, talented man. And is there anybody who was like a devious, evil person?
Not that I know of, not at the corporate level. I mean, there's always a few people, because you had lots of people running around in the different divisions, and I can't say I knew everybody, but the people that I was aware of in the corporate headquarters, they all seemed to be very nice, upstanding, moral, good people. I believe Leo was, I thought he was the vice president of a Fortune 500 company. I forgot the name of it, but he was a very dignified, respectable guy, and several other people had really good backgrounds.
So, to summarize real quickly and briefly, to put everything in a quick nutshell, is it fair to say that it was a good company, they had good track records, they had good positive articles coming out in the newspapers, they had lots of good people associated with it, lots of momentum, lots of good products, lots of good attorneys, lots of good doctors, lots and lots of good stuff going on, but the FDA changed the law for whatever reason on their key product, and that killed everything, and that's pretty much kind of the end of the story.
I would have to say yes, absolutely. That was the plug that was pulled, or the nail in the coffin, however you want to put it.
Or the knife in the back.
The knife in the back, however you want to put it. But even then, something, why they did it, anything is possible. It could be a perfect storm. It could have been the devious plot of some pharmaceutical companies. It could be anything. But that was the key that pretty much killed the deal.
Right. So that's a fair assessment. So what you're saying is you don't have direct knowledge as to exactly why they did change the laws. But the fact is that they did change the law, and that fact that they did change the law and outlawed the patch, which was their key product, that killed the company. Is is what you're saying.
Yes, that's what killed the company. Absolutely. But the way that they pulled the FDA pulled the rug out from under the company looked like it was pretty suspicious the way they pulled it out, because it did totally kill the company.
Right. Okay. Now, do you think that the FDA, in a perfect world, if they wanted to create a new law, that they could have been a little bit nicer about it, a little bit more orderly? Like, in other words, if they knew that this company and other companies had millions of dollars worth of patches in their warehouses, they could have maybe given them a little bit of notice and say, hey, we're coming up with this new rule in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. That way they could orderly make some sort of arrangements, maybe sell off their inventory or do something. But to just suddenly, with no warning, no notice, just overnight come up with a new rule that was kind of mean and abrupt and almost Nazi-like behavior, or just very ruthless. Do you think that there was like any very ruthless behavior by the FDA?
Well, my understanding of the Constitution and the government is that we're supposed to be we the people, by the people, and for the people, and that the government essentially is hired help, period. There are servants. They work for us. There are employees. But that the United States, we the people, are the owners. And the employees, the president all the way down, they are employed by us. So they are hired help, so to speak. And the FDA is one of the servants, our servants. And they're there to protect us and do their job. But basically, did they run wild? Did they run amok? And so we say, well, maybe they did work for the people, but for a select few people, like pharmaceutical companies. So obviously, they did what they were told to do. And whether they were told to do that by some pharmaceutical companies or the competitors, it's very likely, very likely. But definitely, there was a lot of competition. There was a lot of interested parties that did not want to see the Ultimate Business Network succeed, because they were going to compete with pharmaceutical companies and other companies too, multi-level companies, even Herbalife and Amway. So, as far as why the FDA issued that rule, it's very likely. They were told to by some big companies. But irregardless, I have no doubt that was the iceberg that sunk the Titanic.
Right, that's right, yeah. And were you aware that a lot of other government agencies, once the way these agencies work is they all kind of scratch each other's back, and so like once the FDA comes up with a new law, they decide they want to crack down on a company, they want to run them out of business for whatever reason, that they have friends in other government agencies, and they all kind of pile on, kind of like a pack of wolves eating a dead deer, you see. And so, meaning they'll have their friends in the IRS come in and pick on them, they'll have their friends in the postal inspectors pick on them, they have their friends in the SEC pick on them. And some people think that that's the scam, that all these agencies conspire together to come in and attack and hurt a small company in order to protect their big business friends. Because a lot of these agencies, you've probably heard that they will go to work for private enterprise and they'll get millions of dollars in stock for signing up. They'll get big bonuses, big perks, and it's a big buddy system. It's a big, I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back. So kind of the way that it works is that they're in the government agencies and their big business corporatist friends say, hey, we need you to help run this smaller company out of business, blah, blah, blah. Sure, no problem. What do you need me to do? Boom, they do whatever they do. They all pile on. The company goes out of business. And then these agencies, they get rewarded by getting big positions and millions of dollars in stock when they then go to work for the big pharma companies, or not necessarily only big pharma companies, but other big corporations and so forth. And again, they get big perks and stock positions and millions of dollars in benefits.
read the Bible dozens and dozens of times over the years, and I could see the pattern of mankind in general, and in that, we have our good and our bad, and that's just the way it is. We're not all corrupt sinners. We all have that part of us, but I tend to believe that there is a good part, and there's a natural corrupt part, government, and just about everybody. But I try to believe, concerning government, that there is a good side too. There are some people that really legitimately care about us as a whole and want to do the right thing, but you just can't avoid that corrupt, sinful part that wants to take bribes and get payola and everything else. So no doubt that exists, and you just can't stop it.
And I think that the complaint that people make is not that there's monitoring, because that's all good, most people are for that, but that they create an unequal playing field, that a lot of these big agencies, that they favor the big corporatist businesses over the little guys, that they pick on the little guys. For example, the SEC has been known to be a thoroughly corrupt agency and organization. And for example, the SEC will, in many cases, run small companies out of businesses. They'll ruin companies and do actions against people who have no money in the borough, just so they can say, oh, look, we sued these broke people, and we got them to sign off on some document, even though they have no money to fight us, blah, blah, blah. But in the meantime, they are known to be stooges for the big businesses on Wall Street. They're backing big businesses and let them get away with murder, but they'll pick on little guys that have no money to fight them. And for example, the SEC for years let Bernie Madoff get away with blatant fraud and theft, running a Ponzi scheme. And but Bernie Madoff had relatives that worked for the SEC that pretty much let him get away with what he was getting away, and rip people off for estimates between $50 and $100 billion. Okay, but meanwhile they don't even touch Bernie Madoff. They let him steal billions and billions of dollars, but then they'll go after some poor people that have no money and harass them because they know they can't fight back, and they're just trying to get notches under their belt, and just say, oh, look, we stopped this poor guy that really didn't do anything wrong, but he doesn't have money, but we got some little notch under our belt, so that way when they are finished at the SEC, they try to say, look, we did this, we did this, we did this, and then they go into work for big business, and they get perks and millions of dollars in benefit and big paying positions because they say, look, I did all these great things when I was at the SEC, when the reality is most of the time they do pretty much absolutely nothing but help the big business, the big businesses, the big corporations, the Bernie Madoffs of the world, and all they do is they stomp on the little guy, because the big Wall Street companies, they don't like little guys competing with them. So the SEC is a thoroughly corrupt agency. And that's why people like Ron Paul have been calling for them to be dismantled, and Jesse Ventura and lots of other people have pointed out that the SEC is a thoroughly corrupt agency. And incidentally, the SEC was started with their first commissioner, head commissioner, was Joseph P. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's father, and Joseph P. Kennedy was a totally, thoroughly corrupt individual. He used to run all kinds of stock scams during the 20s, and they brought him into the SEC because they thought, he would know about the scams and he could close a lot of loopholes, but he was there for a few years or whatever, and then after he left, supposedly he was still shorting the market and doing all kinds of weird scams and whatnot. But yeah, they're just they just kind of pile on, and they were brought in after the FDA did their dirty business of creating new rules and hurting the company again for whatever reason. But again, these kind of things have happened hundreds of times to all kinds of companies. They've all kind of conspired together to run little companies out of business and to keep the big businesses going strong, because they don't like competition and so forth. So by all means, we need rules, we need government, we need regulations, but it needs to be fair. It should not be slanted towards the big corporate companies. They need to treat everybody equal, but oftentimes they don't.
Well, there's an old saying in Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 5, and it says, basically, cursed is the man who trusts in man, and then blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord. So as far as the government is concerned, if you trust, put all your trust in the government, you're probably not putting your trust in the right place. I mean, you got to follow the laws and go by the rules. But as far as completely trusting in all the government workers to be 100% honest, probably not something you should do. Basically, you got to expect there's going to be lots of corruption, lots of dishonesty going on at all offices in the land. But obviously, there's not much we can do about it. We just have to go forward and expect that these things are going to happen. So basically, I'm forced into looking at the good and the bad of just about everything, with hospitals, with doctors, with the FDA, and about everything. I can see the good, clearly the good and the bad. So I sound like a politician myself, but obviously a lot of good things and bad things. The same with mankind. A lot of good and a lot of bad. So I guess I feel like you can never eliminate the negative. Okay, we're always going to have negative, but you can accentuate the positive and try to dominate the good things. If you depend on government, then obviously I think that's a bad thing to do. A lot of people are forced to be dependent on them, and I'm sorry for them. I hope they get help. But it's really not a good idea to depend on the government.
Good point. Good point. So in that mode, do you think that people should just blindly believe anything they read in a newspaper that may be controlled by, big business or FDA or SEC shills, or should they look at it with a critical eye, critical thinking, and not necessarily blindly and automatically believe anything that they believe in an article just because it's in print, or believe anybody blindly that maybe read that article and then they pass on that information 2 or 3 miles deep, and then that other person who is the recipient of some information at the tail end of a telephone game, should they automatically believe that, or should they try to use their brain and use some critical thinking to think through whether that's true or accurate, or possibly whether some devious players might be fudging the facts?
I try to be an advocate for using your brain whenever you can. I know it's difficult at times for some people, but I would strongly recommend using that stuff in between your ears as much as you can, and it's a good idea. But basically, sometimes there's other reasons that people want to blame people. I mean, I believe, like I said, from reading the Bible and from understanding wisdom, is that really the blame goes right here. And instead of pointing your finger at the devil or this or that, do it right here. And say, you know what, if I screwed up, then maybe I can make a change myself and make things better. Instead of running around blaming this guy, blaming that guy, you could do that your whole life. I don't even think it's a good idea to blame the government, blame this or that, but put the blame here and say, I can't change the weather, I can't change that, but I can change this guy right here, change my attitude and try to make things better. So I guess with New-Source, with First Venture, with 1988, with everything, to me, I look at the whole experience as there were some dark clouds in there, but I see this just tremendous silver lining to all of that. I see this bright, shining silver lining to a couple of dark clouds, and the silver lining was so bright that I loved what happened. I loved that whole turn of events. I mean, sure, the darkness was pretty tough, but that's what I believe and that's what I see. And the same with the government. We can, some people can go on and hate the corruption in the government, or you can say, hey, this is what it is, and deal with it and get the best that you can. So that's how I feel.
Very good, very good. Yeah, that's a fair assessment there. Okay, so in conclusion, you made a lot of excellent points, and those are all the questions that I have. So do you have any final thoughts at all of anything relating to that whole time frame and period? Any lessons, observations, anything else that you would like to add?
Well, one thing about the stock market is it goes up, it goes down. Same things, a lot of things with life. Like I said, during that time, I witnessed two stocks both go up over 10 times in value. The third stock, ATS, that I was involved in, unfortunately, while it was close to launching, the FDA came and pulled the rug out from under us and things collapsed. But still, we were close. The whole company was close to launching a huge company with awesome products. I had the time of my life, meeting thousands and thousands of people from all over the country, getting involved with the company, with buying the stocks, and it was great for a while. After the FDA pulled the rug out, then things did collapse, and there was some tough times. But through it all, I met the love of my life, was married happily for 25 years after that, and I'm very blessed and grateful that everything happened the way that it did, good and bad. So I thank you all. May the Lord bless you all with everything. Thank you, and good night.